Yes. So our website is leapforward.us.us. And much of what I've described here is actually um, elucidated in great details, including videos, by the way, of us with our different interventions. And so you could see our alchemy process. You can see our pollinate. You could see the buddy chat. We actually expose ourselves dynamically so that we become vulnerable and invite you to be vulnerable and see that ultimately vulnerability leads to self-awareness, and self-awareness leads to trust, and trust leads to collaboration and cooperation. So we need to be open. We need to take our mask off. um,
I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. Is it possible to create a transformative community in the midst of what could be called the Great Separation in this time of the coronavirus? Our guest today, Ronit Herzfeld, would say a bold and complete yes to that possibility. Ronit Herzfeld. Welcome back to another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast. And this, of course, is yet another in a chain of episodes that I'm starting with. This is a time like no other. Here we are in the last part of March 2020, and there's very little on the news these days that doesn't have something to do with the coronavirus and around the world, and even the issues that were and obviously still are, but we're filling some amount of these podcasts and so much of the news, the existential level concerns of climate change, of diversity loss, and the chain of other global scale issues that have all had to take a back seat. Well, I'm really pleased today to be able to bring a very different framing. I think it's still extraordinarily relevant with our guest today to be speaking about a world that is truly challenged at a level that humanity has never had to deal with before. And this particular guest and the focus of today's episode is actually a topic that warms my heart. It's I quite early on had a number of years of extraordinary experience of living in intentional community, primarily in Santa Cruz, California. And a number of us living in a big old house together. And because we had a shared context, a way of handling disputes and communicating with one another, and actually a positive frame in which we just did daily life, there was a tremendous amount of love and alignment, and amongst a number of people came from very, very different backgrounds. And all of us just, as the years have gone by and we look back on that experience, we looked at it as one of the finest experiences we've had, any of us. So last year in June, I had the privilege of being able to go to Greece to experience the first full-length version of an introduction to deep adaptation that was led and created by Jem Bendel and his partner, Katie Carr. And I just love being in Greece, and it was hard to go wrong. What a privilege to be there, to be with an extraordinary bunch of people that showed up. And of course, Jem and Katie's work around deep adaptation and all that has grown into. one of the folks that I got to meet, actually, a couple of folks were there, a couple who was involved in creating an intentional community themselves. And while my experience was decades ago and very much old school, you know, have a big old house, have a piece of property, bring people together, they meet face to face, and some of those old school aspects, like having a powerful context, like having methodologies that we can call on in the formulation and then the sustaining of that community. This couple that I got to meet, they really caught my ear because they were doing things using tools that are only available now, that weren't available decades ago. And they kept talking about these extraordinary elements that they had going on with people around the world who may not have even met themselves met each other in person. So my interest was piqued. And so, Ronit, thank you so much for listening to and sitting through this long setup. I just wanted people to be able to get a sense of, like, where did this come from? Why is it important now? And as I was telling you before we got going, in the past couple of days, I've realized this is a perfect time to be talking with Ronit about what is the nature of the success, the apparent success of this formulation of this intentional community that they've been working on. Because here we are in a time of social distancing and actually a very polarized world, where coming together, even as an intentional community of any kind, is an extraordinary effort. But you're doing it in such a way that it's actually more within reach for people than ever before, and driven by the circumstances that we're in. Right. Ronit Herzfeld, I am so glad that you've come and are able to spend some time talking about this extraordinary community that you've been developing. And thanks for taking this time, because I think for all of us, it's, well, priorities are shifting. And so I'm so appreciative that you've made this a priority for today. And so, Ronit Herzfeld, thank you so much for coming in. And please add whatever you'd like to add in terms of how we met, or anything that you would like to introduce yourself in terms of the background that you bring to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dean. It's a pleasure to be here. And it was an amazing experience being in Greece with you and the rest of the members that came from around the world. And we're still connecting, which is really beautiful on a monthly basis whenever we can. So we kind of, you know, our own little community, right? An international community that's maintaining our connection. So let me actually give you a little bit of a background, because the original intention behind Leap Forward, the community that we are part of right now, actually did not originate with being an intentional community. It originated about 5 years ago as a result of my and David's appreciation, David, my husband, appreciation that the world is experiencing such dire circumstances and conditions that are coming at us, and this is 10 years ago, 11 years ago, coming at us, and we're not aware, we're not waking up, we're not really responding to what's going on. And it was that concern that had us at first want to make visible, you know, the challenges that are facing planet Earth, and we are all sentient beings within, and that we need to wake up to that and recognize that we may not continue doing business as usual. That is, working in silos, working in my brand, you know, promoting myself, and that the problems that we're facing and challenges we're facing now will require of all of us coming together and pulling our resources, our expertise, our talents, our point of views, and the diversity was a beautiful thing. And that we can learn from each other, just like in nature, diversity creates a thrivable environment. So does the same situation occurs if we human beings come together. So the original impulse was just making this visible. Hi, people, we're all in this together. We need to stop working apart. We need to start really getting to know each other and see what are the barriers to keep us apart. And so we started at 10, 11 years ago. The path brought us to a place where we were experiencing difficulties getting organizations and people to actually integrate and pool our resources, and recognize that human beings were not ready for that yet. We were not ready for sharing on this level of really kind of egolessness, putting the me in the we and putting the we in the me, so that we can actually see that we're one coherent organism. And so what it kind of moved me into thinking, okay, so what can I do now? How can I access human beings? And it started being very haphazardly, just meeting an individual, sharing my experiences. And by the way, my background is in psychiatric crisis and trauma. And I've been a psychotherapist for over 30 years. And so I worked with poor, I worked with very wealthy, I worked in locked units in mental hospitals, I've worked with, the Integral Institute and Ken Wilber, and all of these, worked with the Dalai Lama and the European Parliament, and all of these allowed me to actually learn and grow and expand my ability to understand human beings and understand our needs. And what possibly is preventing us from coming together is our fears and insecurities. And that if we lower the volume on the fear, then we can actually find our deep connection and love for ourselves and each other. So I started sharing that with individuals, just one-on-one, without any much of an intention. And over the course of the last 5 years, different people crossed the path, my path, and showed an interest. And as I would talk with them and share with them my knowledge about the neuroscience, the psychology, the social reward systems that we're all fed into, and the spirituality, I work with them one-on-one for a year for free. I stopped working for David supported us, and I just started doing this on my own. And then as they began to connect more to what is blocking them from connecting to themselves and to me, let's say, I started bringing them together, and we started meeting online. And at first we met online once a week, and then it became once a week, and then having a buddy system so that they can meet each other and work with each other. And the way I set up the buddy system is, for example, I would put them together in ways that people that have never really connected with each other. So let's say a Libyan Muslim and an Israeli Jew, a black female who is, having difficulty taking care of herself and financial, to a multi-millionaire Bostonian white female. I would bring these very different people together, and they began to get to know each other, and we began to share openly about our fears, our insecurities, and expand it to a community of 16 people from all over the world, all socioeconomic background, ages. We have 20s, 30s to 70-year-olds, and we're all one big family. And out of that arose the desire to come be with each other. Yeah, so that was not the original intention. And yes, you're correct in that this is this moment in time where we have to maintain the social distancing. Leap Forward has proven that we can be in different parts of the world and come from completely different backgrounds and develop and cultivate one of the most loving, caring, committed communities you can ever imagine. So I'll pause here. And so that's kind of the background. I know it's convoluted a little bit, but that's how it unfolded to this moment where we have decided that many of us want to go live together, while others not. You know, others are still staying where they are, and we're still meeting on the average 20 to 30 hours a week on Zoom.
Wow. And that's including the pairs doing their time and
Yes.
yeah,
It's
got it.
including buddy. We have a buddy system. We have pods. We have
Mm-hmm.
work. We have, like a project related pods.
Mm.
And we have caring economy, an economy that takes care of each other. So for example, I just spoke to one of our members and he's experiencing financial needs as a result of what's going on. Then we will go and we'll figure out a way to make sure that he does not lack for anything.
Yeah.
Somebody else, had a baby and she was afraid of, she didn't have a partner. She was afraid of, taking care of the baby by herself. One of us flew out there and stayed with her for 10 days until she could, feel, and she didn't have a mother, until she could feel support and feel that confident too. So we've got caring economy. We've got an alchemy project where we just kind of be with each other for 2 hours twice a week.
Yeah.
And just be quiet and listen to what wants to emerge. So we've learned how to pause, which is what planet Earth is doing right now.
That's right.
It's pausing us.
Yeah.
We've learned how to pause. We've learned how to recognize that chasing money is not the primary thing, but actually relationship and self-awareness and self-care and each other's care is predominant. These are our values. We learned humility, that I know not about you. I know nothing about you. Whether you're Black or you're Muslim or you're Hispanic or you're gay, I know nothing about you until I get to know you. So all my thoughts and ideas about what society has put into me or my culture has put into me, now I get to know you and I discover a whole world, which only expands me and expands my heart and my connection. So yes, I'm going to pause because I can obviously continue for a long time.
Yeah. Well, you just actually, it was quite a brilliant segue, and I'd love to hear more because I remember similar story fragments that you would share back in our time together in Greece. That it was particularly compelling because my experience of people coming together, for whatever reason, but especially to become more intimate with one another, whether it's remotely or you're living together, whatever the form, talking about what is it? It's there's basically a short list of electric third rails, that are just bound and determined to be corrosive in that forming relationship. One of them is money. And here you were just talking about, you've got these structures in place that you all have carefully created that are something of a safety net with each other.
Yes.
And that in and of itself is pretty extraordinary. I think we could probably, as far as I'm concerned, we could spend the whole rest of the time that we're talking about that delicate zone where things so often blow up in the best relationships, a couple trying their best to get going, be married, do the typical, life track, and that can take down the best of us. Yes. So it's an extraordinary kind of pothole, the typical pothole for people to be disabled in. You've just talked about how you've been forming something that's remarkably workable. Yes. With this now still spread out, crew. I would love to spend more time there, but I think there's more to talk about. I'm curious if you could share. I remember recently you were doing some sharing about how you had all gathered in Arizona. I think it was in Scottsdale, and you were talking about the the shifting that was occurring, the growing and the growing closer, and creating an event together, and how that was part of forming as well. I'm wondering if you could just catch us up on how is this evolution going, and how is the form perhaps changing or morphing now that you might not have seen a year or two ago?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, before we go there, because I do think the third rail of the money is so critical, to just give you a little taste of the process,
Yeah,
so that
please.
we can just, tickle people. So being a crisis and trauma worker and working with very wealthy people and very poor people, I came to recognize that money, no matter whether you have a lot or you have a little, you're in prison. You're in prison to this thing, this energetic tool, that society has imposed so much value on, that we can't almost see beyond the money piece. And recognizing that everybody is in their own money prison, I recognize that we have to break open that prison. So, and begin to understand that money is just another resource in life. It's a tool. And it's a tool like, time. It's a tool like intelligence. It's a tool like heart. It's a tool. And that we need to kind of bring that tool to be even to all the other tools, and not so much superior that everything pales in comparison and drives everything. And so the process that we went through, and then this is where I'll be brief, is that every member was asked to write their relationship to money, and deeply, very vulnerably open it up to what was money like when they were a child. What were the messages? How are they, how does it live for them now? And everybody wrote that. And after they wrote it, we have what we call powwows. And it's where the whole community meets simultaneously. And sometimes we meet in pods and what have you, and then there are these big meetings. And everyone was to read their letter, their relationship to money in person to the whole community. And that blew everybody away, because everybody showed their torture and torment around it. The multimillionaires, we have several multimillionaires in our community, and we have people who are middle class, and we have people who are blue collar, and we have people who can barely pay their bills. And everyone was devastated by their relationship to money. And so that opened that channel and allowed us to see that it's just a wound. There's a wound around money, and that we have to heal that wound and bring money back to where it belongs. So that's how we were able to then open that whole system and begin to recognize that I may have money, you may have wisdom, somebody else may have a skill, somebody else may, and let's now create a caring economy. And let's now put all of our resources down, and what needs do you have, and what assets do I have in all of my resources, and how can we share in a way that we're all taken care of together. So that's that piece that I just wanted to bring to. We are all wounded by money.
Yeah.
And that wound must be exposed. The
Yeah.
past needs to come to the surface. We need to listen to each other's wounds and pains, and we need to help heal together and recognize that together we have more than enough. We have abundance.
Yeah.
If we don't hoard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like from what you were sharing earlier about your background, it sounds like that kind of trauma-informed atmosphere has infused into this community, and so you're treating this immensely dysfunctional part of our culture, and how it shows up in each of the individuals in your community. Mm-hmm. You're inviting that each member of the community to take it on, like, what is it to heal this part of trauma in each of our individual systems, and doing that together. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And,
It's
and,
yeah.
and just to bring it into, and we're doing it from 4 different perspectives. So a lot of what I do is integral, it's an integrated approach to the human being, body, mind, heart, and soul. So we're doing it from a neurological perspective where you've been kind of like, programmed early on that this is danger, money is danger, and money is survival, and if you don't have it, you're going to die. Yeah, so we're programmed with that. Psychologically, we're programmed that the more I have, the cooler I am, the more powerful I am. So it has that status in society. So we're like to hold on to that. And we're programmed by, the reinforcement is that it is a transactional tool. Yeah, like, what are you going to do for me? What am I going to do for you? And here's the reward system, and there's competition around that. And so all that messiness. And then we bring all of that in the container of spirituality, and that we're all one and we're all in this together. So if we're all one and all of this together, we need to heal the neurological, the psychological, and the social dysfunction reward system around it, so that we can come back to our hearts and to our truth. And so it's a very rigorous process, because we educate about how the brain works, we educate how the psyche works, and we educate about how the social transactions and competitions all embed in us and make it as if it's automatic, and we don't even know that there's another way of being.
Yeah, got it. I actually trust completely if you've got a direction that you'd like to go in from there. Where I would go right now is asking if you see the level of collapse that seems to me to be present right now in our global business as usual systems, particularly the economic system. I've been hearing from some people whose economic knowledge and projections I respect, that this is clearly an event that we're not going to just bounce back from. That this will have lasting impact that may be forever. And so,
in some way, we hope, right? In some way, we hope. We hope that this really shakes us to our roots, right? And really gets us to stop and listen carefully to our priorities and our values, and recognize that the path that we've been on up until now has led us to this, catastrophic place.
right.
And catastrophic in Greek, catastrophe means revelation or revealing. So in a way, yeah, I hope that I'm devastated for the pain and the suffering that's going on, but if it's going on, let it be in the service of what's possible, which is stop, pause long enough to take a step back and evaluate what are our priorities as a species on this planet, what are our values, and then embed new structures, new systems, and new visions and goals for how humanity can relate and cooperate together. So I am very much of the mind that my role and our community's role, and by the way, we're very actively involved right now in that, is how do we embed what we've learned over the last 4 years into some systems and organizations that are beginning to fray and recognize that something else wants to emerge, embed our values and vision into those systems, and put in reinforcers, put in their, kind of like solid reinforcers so that people don't fall back. And so we have the hashtag of no going back. Yeah, this is about leaping forward.
Yeah, very good. So what came up for me while you were describing that is the words that I've heard quite often used for right now is we obviously have a global scale pause. And one possible framing of this pause is an opportunity to have a collective conscious rite of passage. That's what I think I was hearing you describe.
Absolutely.
Well, is there more you'd like to say on that track?
Well, I mean, so we are, our community, and one of our, kind of primary drives is to be outrageous. We really feel that outrageous, out of the box, not doing the ordinary, because the only way shift and change can occur is in something outrageous emerging. So right now we are on a path of being outrageous, and we are developing a tool that is going to assess needs, biological, physical, emotional, psychological, economic, etc. needs that humanity has, and then some of the initiatives and the resources that are showing up. And we have the intention of seeing if we can create the caring economy that we created for us, to actually make that visible and potentially bring it into being with other communities and other organizations around the world. So that's kind of that's one of the initiatives we're working on is, can we give the structure and the DNA of caring economy, where human beings are going to economically be able to find other ways in which to care for each other that is not competitive, but rather cooperative, and from a space of abundance rather than scarcity, and really just go crazy, go wild here with the possibilities. And to just give you again another example, when we initially came up with this whole concept, we decided to see if we can put our money where our mouth is as a community. And so we asked people to, on an Excel sheet, see if they were willing to invest in this new initiative and in this new vision of we're all in this together and taking care of each other. How much money would you be willing to invest in this? Like your, maximum where it becomes uncomfortable. How much time, what resources, what skills, what other assets will you be willing to do, to invest in order to make this now true? And this created a lot of angst in people. People that didn't have any money were feeling guilty, and what can I give, and da-da-da. And people that had too much money, no, I don't want to give it. And, I mean, it was right. But over the course of weeks, frankly, we finally came up with $246,000 with 72 hours of work a week, and tons of skills and assets that we were going to be contributing. And then what did we do? We took that money and we put it in a bank account, and we put every one of our names on that bank account, regardless of what you contributed. Some people contributed 30,000, and some people didn't contribute anything. And everybody's name on it, and it's an or, not an and. Yeah, and that's it. Let go, let God. So what I'm saying is building trust, where we human beings must go, the path that we must take if we're going to move forward in some kind of a cooperative and collaborative, is check our egos and recognize that it's here that, like everything, all the juice of life really happens. It's in relationship, it's in trusting relationship, it's in cooperation, it's in creativity, and it's thriving, all of us thriving together. Yeah, takes away the fear, the insecurity, the fraudulence, the masks, all that stuff that right now we're doing in order to protect ourselves from each other. But in the meantime, we all feel lonely, isolated, and at the end of the day, helpless.
Yeah.
No matter how much money you have, helplessness, because you feel so alone in the world. So this is the kind of medicine that we're bringing into being. And I just wanted to share it because if anybody's hearing it and wants to start it on their part of the world, by all means, let's see if we can start being outrageous and really take this issue on, that we are one, we are interdependent, and we need to take care of each other if we're going to thrive together.
Yeah, beautiful. So I'm curious, how's it going in terms of the form? It actually seems like what you're describing, layer by layer, is how effective this structure is, how inclusive, how nourishing and embracing it seems to be. And so far, I'm not hearing that there's much need for actually living together in, if it's a house or a neighborhood or whatever the form of it needs to be. Is that still on the horizon for you all?
So, yeah, so I don't think that it arose out of a need, because the fact that we can live in different parts of the world and still be so completely there for each other. In other words, if you have a need, you write it, and we have an app. We have a special app called the Garden of We, because we see ourselves as garden. And if you communicate, I have a need, within 4 to 5 hours, that need is either going to be fulfilled if it's immediate, like I need to talk to someone, I have an issue, or I need money, or I need so as it exists, the community is, even though we're all in different parts of the world, we're completely taking care of each other as if we're in right next door to each other. Now, 6 members have chosen to to live together, but not even then, not under the same roof, but in the same complex. So we're 2 minutes away from each other, walking distance, and we have an office. And we've been doing that in Scottsdale for 4 months. And that came out of a desire, not a need, a desire to challenge ourselves even further. What would it be like if now we're working together 24/7 and eating together, and and what other issues, we call it schmutz, the static noise, schmutz, what other issues are going to arise when we're rubbing against each other so much?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the core group, by the way, that's the core team for the most part. And so and then we invite, and other members come and stay with us for weeks at a time, or whatever they want. And then we rub against each other that way, and different people take different responsibilities. So eventually, if people want to do it, they can, but it's not a mandate or a need. And by the way, I just want to make sure that I'm clear that once a year we meet, the whole community meets together for 4 to 5 days in different parts of the country or the world. So so that happens twice a year, and the rest of the time we're on. And that only happened after the first year. So the first year we didn't meet at all, except for online. And then after the first year, we started meeting online twice a year. And that's been amazing, because there's a whole other experience, of course, when you are able to feel each other, touch each other. And there we do sleep under the same roof. We get like a big space, and we are together nonstop, cooking together, all of that for 5 days. Now, the event, if you want to just go back to the event that you mentioned earlier, what was very dynamic about that event is that it emerged out of our alchemy, like sitting there and contemplating our navels of what wants to emerge. And what emerged was, you know what, let's bring at least 2 members of our family or friends to an event. We'll have a 3-day event, and we will fly them and take care of them, and give them the experience of who we are and what we're all about. And by the way, we're developing a kind of like a 10-minute video of that whole event. And if you're interested, when it's fully edited, I can send it to you. But what happened there is that the intention was to have these family members and friends and colleagues of ours get a sense of who we are and what we're about. I mean, it's one thing to hear about it, it's another thing to experience it. And so we created this event. The agenda was unity in diversity. So people from all colors, all religions, of course, came. right? Because they represent each one of us. People came from, so there was one agenda, unity and diversity. The second agenda was giving them a sense of awe and wonderment, because that's when I talk about the outrageousness of our project, we are just outrageous people. We're constantly doing crazy, outrageous things. And we're doing that because it's scary. And we're doing that to challenge our fear of failure. And we're doing that because we understand that creativity can only occur when you're doing outrageous things. So we're incredibly unreasonable in our agendas and our goals. So we wanted the family members and the friends to experience our agenda, our awe-inspiring vision and experiences. And these were all visceral, by the way, all visceral. So for example, when you came in, we had it in a big mansion and it had gates, and you come through these gates. You know, there was a trumpeter on one side and there was another person, announcer, on the other side. And as you walked in, we knew who you were because we got the text of whoever drove you there, and your name was announced. And then the trumpeter would do some kind of like a, sound of welcoming. That was just like the entry. And then every step of the way was awe, like freak you out. On one hand, you are listening to Japanese drummers, going crazy. And the next thing you know, you've got the African drummers are coming from around the corner, and they're all in garb and they're doing a completely different rhythm. And the next thing you know, you're like in a garden inside a room, but there's a garden and there's like audio is taking you through this meditative thing. I mean, we just did outrageous. All of that was done within 3 weeks. All of it was done with 3 weeks. We redesigned the whole space. We only had 2 hours in which to do all that stuff. And that's what happens. We demonstrated what integrated cooperation, when people trust each other and they don't have ego schmutz, we become outrageous. We become wild in our imagination and wild in our productivity and cooperation. During that period of time, as intensive and pressured as it was to be ready, we had 2 incidents that resolved in 3 minutes. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the second, outrageous cooperation and creativity. And the third is make love visible, visceral, so that when the people landed there, they knew they were home. They could just shed everything and just be themselves. And the feedback we got were actually these 3 things verbatim. As soon as I got there, I felt like I was home. You blew me away with your attention to detail and your outrageousness. Blew us away. And we saw all these different religions, traditions, all of us sitting together, being together, sharing together, and we were one. So that was that experience. And I don't know where we're going from here. What we're doing now is listening for what wants to emerge, which has always been our value. So we're very much based on biomimicry and nature. Nature doesn't go, you know what, let's see. Okay, I have a vision. I want to get a river down, in that part of the world. Okay, in 6 months, there'll be a river going down there. Or in a year, we'll have a mountain. It doesn't work that way. We human beings are cuckoo. That's not how it works. We need to listen to what wants to emerge. And we need to understand what's involved. We need to understand and get the lay of the land. What's present? What is really, so we operate from listening. So instead of jumping into the situation right away, we paused and we said, okay, what wants to emerge? Like, everybody's frenetic. And for some reasons, in the case of medical emergencies, economic emergencies, definitely we need to act. But for those of us that are not in that space, let's pause and not do what we normally do, which is go fix and go do. But actually, what is Mother Earth asking of us right now? How could we best serve? And listen from the heart and listen with values and alignment.
Yeah. That's right on track. Everything you've been sharing is right on track with what was getting more and more clear to me, what was becoming more and more exciting to me in these past few days. We'd already booked when we were going to be talking, and the events of the world were so obviously pinching down people into their separateness and into their smallness. Each of our little worlds were becoming smaller and smaller given the circumstances. And I'm quite familiar, given some decades of being involved with transformation work, with your use of the word outrageous. I'm just so thrilled at what you've laid out for us, what you've described for us as the context and the container that you've created for this kind of vibrant and luscious possibility to emerge in the form of some sort of relationship, some sort of maybe never to be fully formed alliance that you seem to have created. It's hard for me to imagine something more important and different from the pinched down separateness and fear of these times. There's literally no outrageousness there. And so what you've been describing so appears to live at the other end of the spectrum in terms of literally the opposite
Yes.
of so many of the elements present right now.
Yeah.
To be so empowered by inviting that which wants to emerge, and to have a mutual alignment to invite your outrageousness and your deep bonding and trust.
Yeah.
Each of these elements, it's just fascinating to me how perfect this conversation at this time, the contrast is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So I'm very inspired by everything that you're sharing, and so appreciating it. I feel my own sense of opening to everything that you're sharing, and this delight, this kind of a bubbly feeling of delight
Yeah.
with each element that
Absolutely,
you've been
right?
describing. So I just so appreciate that. And unfortunately, I'm seeing this window of time together in this conversation drawing to a close, and I'm just hoping against hope that we have a number of more opportunities to speak, because I personally, for me, we've just barely begun, and I'm so enthralled with the idea of being able to pull on any of the threads to get more detail. And so, where do you go with this? And so I'm just know that hunger is very alive for me here.
Yeah, whet your appetite a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
Because of course there's layers and layers and layers of how we've arrived here. We human beings are incredibly complex creatures. And so the more that we understand how we operate, the more we can address these fears, these insecurities, this contracting, and begin to open the heart, open the mind, open to the spirit, so that we can meet each other in that oneness, in that common space that we all share.
yeah,
So, yeah.
I'm curious. Is there a way for people who their their appetite has been whetted by this conversation as well? Is there a way that people can find out more? Is there a way to contact you or to find out more information about? I think you call yourselves Leap Forward. How can we find out more?
Yes. So our website is leapforward.us.us. And much of what I've described here is actually um, elucidated in great details, including videos, by the way, of us with our different interventions. And And so you could see our alchemy process, you can see our pollinate, you could see the buddy chat. We actually expose ourselves dynamically so that we become vulnerable and invite you to be vulnerable, and see that ultimately vulnerability leads to, you know, self-awareness, and self-awareness leads to trust, and trust leads to collaboration and cooperation. So we need to be open. We need to take our mask off. So there, and however, it is going to be updated. So it's not updated. If you want further updates, you know, you can contact us through the website. And if people have any questions, we can certainly respond to them. And we're also looking at possibly beginning to gather people who are interested in learning more about this and creating circles for them, and inviting people to new circles like Leap Forward, but new circles, and our members, we can support that. So we're looking and doing that right now.
Beautiful. Ronit, it's just been a pleasure. I had no idea, meeting you in Greece and the early version of the conversation, had no idea what the world would be going through to get us to here, what you would be going through in the evolution of Leap Forward. And certainly in my own experience of these times, it is truly an opportunity. This global pause is an opportunity at a scale that I never could have imagined.
Yeah.
And so the timing is indeed perfect for your sharing of this extraordinary and outrageous
experiment.
Yeah, experiment in living. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. As I've already mentioned, I am really inspired and looking forward already to the next time we might be able to talk. And thanks so much for taking this time.
My pleasure, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share us, because you know, the whole concept of pollinate, you know, to make this visible and to show what's possible, because humanity, I think for the most part, doesn't know that we are capable of this level of cooperation, care, love, and trust. So here we are, strangers met and decided to try this on, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. We want to share it with the rest of the world. So thank you for that opportunity.
Absolute pleasure. Take good care of yourselves.
You too. Thank you. And stay safe.
Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.